Thank you, Annie, for that wonderful intro, and thank you all for having me here. I want to cover a few things, the first one being sustainability and the concept of sustainability, and the second one being my journey, talking a little bit more about how I came to doing what I'm doing, which is the water filtration, and then a few leadership lessons to leave you with. But the concept of sustainability is one of long-term, and the concept of the triple bottom line, the environmental, economic, and social. As leaders, you're going to make a lot of decisions, and a lot of those decisions that you make have artificial time boundaries of we have to make these decisions now, they have to be impacted now. And the conventional thinking, one thing that I learned at Cornell, the conventional thinking is financial return for immediate gain. And when you look at how the stock market is run, how things are really translated to immediacy, even look at email and some of the other forms of communication, there's much more of a sense of we have to get it done now, and it has to make money or it doesn't make sense. And I think that some of those conventional business practices go counter to the concept of sustainability. The concept of sustainability is really looking at what's the best in the long term. If I want to grow my company for the long haul, I'm going to make some investments up front that are going to pay off down the road. I'm going to do something that ensures that my employees are happy, because my employees are an important component of the fabric of what's going to make my company continue to be successful. And so this concept of the conventional business being wrapped up with the financial return only immediacy is contrary to the concept of sustainability, which is really look at the environmental, social, and economic aspects and look at the long term. Oftentimes when people hear environmental and social aspects, they start to go down the route of philanthropy. And I actually think this is a very negative connotation for sustainability. I think that if you, philanthropy is great in and of itself, but it's based on a model of make money by doing the worst possible things that you can do, and then give the money away to try to fix some of those problems later. And I really think, my father always said, I don't like the concept of giving back, because why'd you take it in the first place? The concept of you really need to look at a more holistic light at the concept of your business making a positive impact. And this has ramifications for society. As you look at how things, many of you may not go into business, you may go into nonprofits, you may go into government, you may go into other areas. And the concept right now under the conventional business model is that corporations focus on the financial next quarter bottom line return, and they kind of ignore environmental and social things unless regulated. And then you have governments which come in and try to police these environmental and social aspects or fix the problems with other types of programs. And you have nonprofits which are often complaining about the bad practices, and it's creating quite a negative spiral, a spiral in which the companies are not working together with the government, not working together with the nonprofits, but rather working against and looking at them as a drain on their bottom line, as something that they have to do to remain charitable, and it's really a system out of balance. The concept of a sustainable business model, if you have a company that's incorporating the environmental and social aspects into the business that they do, and you have governments then that can say, that's a really great model, and incent that type of behavior. Rather than being penalties, it can be incentives, and it can give you a competitive advantage because your competition is having to deal with regulations or dealing with things when you've done the right thing, taken the high road, done positive impact, and you're actually having a more positive relationship with the government. In addition, with nonprofits, nonprofits can promote the businesses who are doing well. They can say, this is a great organization to work with, and they can give a positive cycle towards the company, so that now you have, rather than problems being caused and different organizations trying to piecemeal solutions or band-aids onto many different problems, you have the problems being addressed at the core, and you have the ability for all the groups to come in together and just move in a positive momentum cycle. So that's why the concept of sustainability is really very important, not just for businesses, but for society to be able to have these positive reinforcing cycles. So in terms of sustainability, that's the I guess that's the core of what drives me and my philosophy in terms of sustainability. And Cascade Engineering has been an example of that, but we have other examples in the region. Herman Miller, they have some really great things that they've been doing. They're driving towards zero landfill, 100% renewable energy, zero footprint by 2020. Meyer has been doing things with promoting wellness for their employees, doing greening the supply chain, other types of programs. And with companies such as Herman Miller and the furniture industry, they're actually going one step further of setting industry standards. Has anyone heard of the BIFMA standards and some of the other standards in the furniture industry? They're actually saying, hey, let's get together and say environmental design is important. Let's put a standard in place, and then people have to rise to that standard. And so that's a neat opportunity that industries are kind of coming together. And I think that there's actually some very exciting opportunities in this region, in West Michigan, that make it a potential location for the center of kind of the sustainability movement, which is gaining momentum around the globe. So with that, I'll talk a little bit. That was sustainability. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey. Our family moved to Switzerland when I was in high school, so I actually graduated from high school abroad, which was a different experience for me, having grown up in the same house on the same street with the same friends for a number of years, and suddenly being in a different culture. And one of the things that stuck with me was that I was struck by the sameness. You know, I expected it to be very different, very foreign, and I found that they were the same types of people that I was friends with, that it was a very similar culture, that people spoke different languages, but I was really struck by, at the core level, the sameness that I found when I went abroad. I continued to travel, and when I was in Africa, I was struck again by the sameness of the human culture and the things that are driving things, but I was also struck by the value placed on social networks, and the concept that one person who was actually in Uganda, I said, you know, there is some poverty here. There was obviously, you know, many people that didn't have electricity, many people that didn't have access to water, and she said, I've never seen poverty like I've seen in Washington, D.C. And she had been there once before, and I was struck by that, because I said, you know, we got all these infrastructure, these great buildings, you know, everyone has clean water. Why would she say something like that? But she said that the people on the street don't have anybody. They're by themselves. They're very isolated, and it highlighted that our culture is very isolated. Even though we have many groups, when somebody's in poverty on the street, they're by themselves. Whereas she said, where's their family? Where's their social network? Where are their friends? And that very much struck me, because the value that we place on economics in our society and on getting ahead, do we sometimes leave out the people aspect, and the concept that we are all one group together, and we all need to take care of each other, which is so strong in other places where there isn't as much stuff, but there's a lot of engagement on the social side. Another part that made up who I am is traveling to Costa Rica, and I was struck there by the environmental biodiversity. You know, you have open lots of land here, and some stuff grows. You have open lots of land in Costa Rica, and you have, you know, these plants that I've never seen before, that are huge, with giant insects and all these different aspects. And the way that Costa Rica has really taken a stance of, we want to be a sustainable country in terms of our environmental footprint. So that was very interesting. The stance that they've taken, the importance of environmental biodiversity, and the prominence that takes in their GDP. Actually, a lot of their tourism is ecotourism. They have a lot of organic that comes out of Costa Rica. So they've really taken that stance as a government that they want to be known as a sustainable country. So that was neat. And then as I went to Washington, D.C., I worked for a nonprofit organization. I don't know if any of you have ever worked for nonprofit organizations, and one of the things that's frustrating about working for a nonprofit organization is constantly fundraising. There's a there is this sense of how much do you spend on programming versus getting that money for the next year and getting that money for the next year, and you're almost forced to look at the short term because you have to do things within your budget. And there is a sense that nonprofits do have the heart, that they often have the social and the environmental figured out, but they don't necessarily have the economic. And that if we can stop, I guess, diverting at some point in our career, and it's somewhere around where many of you are right now, there's this artificial decision point of, should I do something meaningful with my life or should I make a lot of money? And that is a decision point that I think is very difficult and is very not necessary. I don't think that you have to make that decision of doing something good or making money. I think that those can be combined, and that's the concept of sustainability. And that actually, if we continue to make that divisive line where we say, well, you're a nonprofit, that's nice, you don't really do much, or you don't make a lot of money, or you've given your heart to that, so that's nice, but I don't take you seriously. If we continue that type of attitude, and on the other side, if we continue the attitude of, oh, well, you're very successful, you work for a large bank or investment firm, and you've earned a lot of credibility, and just assume that they're not very environmentally or socially conscious, there's this disparity and this difference, and I think it happens around the time when you have to decide or declare your major, or say draw a line in the sand and say I'm for money or I'm for saving the world, and I really think that that's an artificial line that's drawn, and I think that I was both frustrated when I worked at a nonprofit by the lack of planning economically, but I was also frustrated at Cornell by the lack of focus on environmental and social, on the focus on the financial. And I really think that there has to be this kind of center. And some of the reasons that I think West Michigan is a potential leader in this area are because we have a sense of what is real here. I think that that's something that is stuck with me. I've been to San Francisco a lot, and in San Francisco there's a lot of talk about sustainability. There's a lot of cerebral talks about what is sustainability, how does this work, but there aren't a lot of examples, of sustainable companies that I've run into, of sustainable companies that are just trucking ahead, doing the work because it's something you should do. And so I think that there's a sense here in West Michigan of, there's a ethics or a value in a lot of the small family-owned companies and some of the larger publicly owned companies that just are rooted and based in a community and that are working forward to move ahead in the concept of sustainability. So I really think that this region has an opportunity to become a leader worldwide in the area of sustainability because we have many examples of people who are working at it, not just talking about it. So I think that that's a bit about sustainability, and I just wanted to talk a bit about the program that I'm doing right now, which is the HydrAid BioSand Water Filter project. So how many people do you think lack access to safe water supplies worldwide? Anybody?
A lot.
There are 800 million people who lack access to safe water supplies. Globally, diarrhea is one of the leading causes of illness and death. 88% of the cases of diarrhea are attributable to unsafe water. there's 3.575 million people dying every year from waterborne disease. So if you bring that down to children, nearly 1 in 5 children's deaths are due to diarrhea, and it kills more young children than AIDS, malaria, and measles combined. So water is a huge issue, also of lost productivity. At any given time, half of the world's hospital beds are occupied by patients suffering from diseases associated with lack of access to safe drinking water. So we don't think about that a lot here in West Michigan because we have the Great Lakes, we've got tap water, we've got well water, we've got all these great sources of water, but a lot of the problems around the world are associated with not having the basic water. But the thing about that is that the WHO estimates that 94% of diarrheal cases are preventable through modifications in the environment, including water treatment and safe storage. So when I came into Cascade Engineering and I was working on a few different programs, they said, you have a background in international development, you have a passion for making things work. Let's see what we can do with the HydrAid BioSand Water Filter. This was about almost, I guess, a year or two ago that I kind of took on this HydrAid BioSand Water Filter and said, what can we do with this? It is a technology that is saving lives. It's a technology that's proven to be sustainable for the long term. And so how can we make this a good business? So my father says often, start with something that's good and then make it good business. Because you can always start with something that makes money and then try to make it good for the world later, but it's much harder. If you start with something that's good and then try to make it good business, you already know that you've solved the hardest criteria, and then it's a challenge of how you can make it a good business. So we started with this vision. Cascade Engineering has the capacity to produce 250,000 HydrAid BioSand water filters a year. A filter placed in a home addresses the needs of one family, which is 8 to 10 people. So 250,000 BioSand water filters could address the needs of as many as 2.5 million people per year. And let's go back to that statistic. 3.5 million people are dying from waterborne disease every year. So we could substantially address a global problem right here in West Michigan with assets and resources that we have. So that was our big picture. Where are we going with that? We have just signed a letter of intent with the Honduran government to do 40,000 filters over the next few years. And they are looking at partnering where they pay half and donors in the US will pay half, and they'll cover the implementation costs of the filters in the country. We have a program with USAID and Rotary International to do 9,000 filters in the Dominican Republic. We're working on a program right now in Tanzania with a Tanzanian ambassador and the Ministry of Education as well as the Ministry of Health, where they're going to cover 25% locally and 75% with donations to get filters in schools and hospitals in and around Tanzania. So this is the beginning. This is small steps. And we're also working with a micro entrepreneurship model so that filters don't have to be just donated, that they can actually be bought and sold and create local jobs and income. So we're working on that sustainable model in a pilot phase right now in Honduras as well. So that's our concept. We saw that there's a need. We saw that there are people dying from water-related illnesses. We have a technology that lasts for 10 plus years, is very simple to use, and is a sustainable technology. And so how can we get that to people who are in need? So that's a bit more about the program. The only other story that I did want to share with you about the HydrAid is when I was recently in Honduras. There was a lady, and she had us into her home, and she said before the filter, she had 3 to 4 of her kids were sick at any given time. And so if you think about that, have any of you ever had sick kids or sisters or brothers? It takes a lot of energy to have sick children. And if you think about that, every time that these kids got healthy, these kids would get sick. And she'd be energizing towards getting the kids healthy, and then those kids would get sick. And she doesn't have time to keep the house clean. She doesn't have time to do all these different tasks because there's a lot of sickness in her home. She said that after having the filter for 2 months, she said that for once all of her children were healthy. So this was the first time. So I started to count them, and I said, okay, 1, 2, 3. Well, you said you had 8. I only count 6. And so she said, well, the other 2 are off getting firewood. So she had not only increased her ability to get work done, but she also had now this workforce of people who are going to help her continue the work. So it's those types of stories that keep coming back. We had filters go down to Haiti to help address cholera. 5 of them went into the Matthew 25 guest house, and they've been helping almost 1,000 people a day who have been coming through. And with the chlorinator that we have on the other side, you can make many make it continuous use. So we have almost 1,000 people that have been working in the Honduran or in the Haitian slum area, really being protected. And then we have actually one of our filters went into an orphanage that was covered by CNN. So it wasn't directly about the HydrAid, but CNN came in and said this orphanage is now up to international standards, and they showed a picture and there's the HydrAid right in the thing. So I said, oh, that's great. But we have a lot of really neat programs going on. It's cultivated some local entrepreneurship. There's a lady who made popsicles out of the water. There's also women who make chili and other things from the water from the filter, and are able to create, get more money for their product because they know that it's filtered and it's a good system. So that's a few of the stories. I have lots of pictures, and there's also a video and other things about the water filter, but it's been really meaningful for me to be able to go to work and work on something that I know is changing lives and try to figure out how to make that good business, how to make it sustainable, so that we can continue to grow as Cascade Engineering and to have sustainable products and sustainable business models that will help people and the environment. So wanted to leave you with a few leadership lessons. One is that you're not a leader if no one is following. And in my experience, people follow people because they respect them or because they have to. And if you have to, they're not going to follow you very long when no one's looking. So the concept is that build respect, build credibility, and people are going to want to follow you. Also, there's a YouTube clip from a TED Talk where they talk about the why you do something and then the what you do. The more you talk about the why you do something, the more likely people will follow you. When you talk about the what you do, it's interesting, but people buy onto an idea. They don't buy onto a product. So the concept that you talk about what drives you, and that helps people want to follow you. The second one is that everybody is capable of something. As you go on to manage people, there's a sense sometimes of, what are you capable of, or what are the people that you're managing doing? And the thing that to really do is to set them up for success. Because oftentimes if someone's failing and you're leading them, it's not their fault completely. It's your fault as a leader. You have to make sure that you set up your teams for success, that you set up systems and try to understand if they're not successful, what is it that you're doing that might be the cause of their downfall, and make sure that you've communicated clearly what your objectives are, what your metrics are, and so that you're all on the same page, because it's really important not to place blame on anyone, especially anyone working for you as a leader, that really you look at what can you do to set people up for success. So we've got make sure that you're being respected and that people want to follow you. We've got set people up for success, because everybody is capable of something. And the final point is just that one time somebody did a talk, and I thought it was really interesting, because they said a good leader stands in front of criticism and steps aside for praise. And that is the opposite of what might be natural. You know, if someone wants to praise, you might step up and say, okay, yes, thank you, it's all me. You know, and you might, as there's criticism, it's, you know, it was their fault. And the concept that a good leader stands in front of criticism and steps aside for praise. I think if you can practice that, that's a really important leadership skill. So those are my 3 words of leadership. And I wanted to also just play the video really quickly if anybody hasn't seen that. And then any types of questions. So thank you again for having me.